everyone. I am really excited to be able to do the unboxing for NIS 10 today. Many thanks to NIS America for sending me this copy. And while I get the cellophane cover off so we can admire the box, I will tell you why I have been nervous about this game. The reason is that, as you probably all know, I am a big NIS fan. I love all the NIS games. I've never had a bad one, but my favourite, as you probably also know, is NIS 8. But then, when NIS 9 came out, Monstrum Nox, that was a very different kettle of fish, I'd say. And unfortunately, that was an NIS game that didn't quite resonate with me as much as the others. Probably because it's a very grey world. It looks quite drab. And the whole, world, even the characters, it wasn't quite the usual love affair I have with NIS games. I'm not saying it's a bad game, not at all. As I said, I've never had a bad NIS game. But I wondered whether they were moving in a different kind of direction, and I got a bit jittery, to be honest. So that's why I was a bit nervous about NIS 10. But as details were released about the Nordic world they were building, I was kind of hopeful. Let's dive straight into the unboxing. Once we've seen all the items, I want to show you a little bit of my first impressions of the game, and I will show you both the PS5 version and the Switch version. I always like having a look at how they run on each platform, and in particular for the Switch version, it's of course important how does it run in docked mode and in handheld mode. I know you want to know about that, so we'll have a look at that. So here is the box, front cover and back cover. We see the two main characters, Adol, whom we know of course, and the new female protagonist, Karja. I'll talk a bit more about her later. She is certainly very intriguing and a fun character. The usual Nisa sturdy cardboard quality. I'm happy to see it's still there. Alongside the box came this bag, so why don't we start with that? It says East Nordics Slingbag, material polyester, design copyright by Falcom. So here it is, in a fairly neutral colour, what I would call a light taupe colour. A strap on the back. It's not a large bag. A lot of the bags you get with limited or collector's editions tend to be on the more voluminous side, so I've got quite a few of those. So having a smaller bag is actually quite nice. So I've opened up the zippers, and this gives you an idea of the size. So the East Nordics box would just fit inside, just to illustrate. It has a lining on the inside which would be easy to clean, and on the front here there's a small zipper compartment, and the back is covered in a sort of mesh fabric which would allow a bit of breathability as you wear it on your back. So I would say that's a pretty cool smaller size sling bag. As usual, the Nisa boxes are always tightly and securely packaged. First item, let's have a look. A metal pin. I'll just get it out of the bag. East Nordics metal pin. So I've just pinned it on, and as you can see, I'm wearing my East t-shirt today, obviously. And there is a connection between this shirt illustrating the earliest Ys game, Ys Chronicles 1 and 2. Ys 10 is set quite early in the chronology, between the events of Ys 2, the end of Ys 2, and Memories of Salsetta. Because the story in Ys 10 starts with Adol and Dogi setting out, Adol a 17-year-old, for Salsetta, but they never get there. They stop off en route in the Gulf of Obelia, and that's where the events of Ys 10 take place. Some art cards, I'll get them out of the cellophane. So it's very much obviously a maritime world in Ys 10. And right at the beginning, when you set out on that ship with Adol and Dogi, I was reminded very strongly, and I want to show you this, because I have in fact already started the game on the PS5, and I've taken a tiny clip just off the opening on the ship, and I want to show you that, as well as the clip of the opening scene of Ys 8. And I think then you will understand what I mean, because that's when I got really, really excited.
Man, that Captain Barbaros. He looks intimidating, but he's a good man. Dependable, too. Thanks to him, we'll be able to hit the next stop on our journey once we dock. I'm a little sad we gotta say goodbye to Xandria. But there's no time to be moping when adventure's waiting for us. I'm looking forward to it, buddy! Is this weather perfect or what? The brisk ocean breeze, the wide open sea, smells like a new journey on our horizon. I gotta say, I'm glad I took you up on your offer, Adol. Being stranded on Asteria for so long was really getting to me.
The English voice acting throughout is just great.
I'm glad I asked you to come.
Adol speaks. He has always been very traditionally the silent protagonist. So, a change? Well, don't get your hopes up too high.
I felt this chipper.
I hope you can see why I had this instant feeling of recognition. It's of course different from Ys 8, but I had this feeling I'm home. This is the adventure I've been looking for. Okay, what do you think? My heart was just overflowing when I saw that scene on the ship in Ys 10, and I thought, I'm back on home territory. It's gonna feel just like Ys 8. It's not the same story, of course not, it is quite different, and there are a boatload of new features. But from the moment I started up Ys 10, I just had this feeling that I knew everything was gonna be alright, and I was just gonna love it the way I loved Ys 8. So here are some art cards. That's the inn where they're staying. A naval scene with a maritime monster. Karja in full Nordic gear. And with a Viking style boat in the background. And here I need to mention a bit about the background, about the world building, without giving anything much away because I want this to be, as much as possible, a spoiler-free unboxing and talk about the game, because there's nothing like that exciting sense of first discovery and exploration and getting to know the characters and all that, you know. If you read too much about it beforehand, it doesn't feel quite as fresh, you know. A lovely landscape scene, because there are hundreds, if not thousands, of islands dotted around this Gulf of Orbelia. So the background is that Adol and Dogi end up in this Orbelia region where there is a native population of people living and working in that maritime area. They basically come under the administration of the Roman Empire, which you will be familiar with if you've played any other East games. But they're not much present because there's another force in the area who have pretty much taken control, especially of the maritime traffic around there, which is all important. And that are the Nordic people. They call themselves Normans, and as you can see, they look rather Viking-like. Now, straight away, we experience this conflict between these two groups of people, the locals of Orbelia and the Normans, and rather than being sort of background information, you know, I felt like I was in a real world with people who had real tensions and conflicts. That's what it felt like straight away to me. And that's what pulls you into a story, of course. On top of that, we have a further, more general conflict, and that is between the younger generation, a sort of adult's age, you know, around the 17-18 mark, and of course the older generation who are generally in charge of things, with both groups. So here you have a portrait of both Adol and Karja, and I'll say it straight away. Karja is currently my favourite tsundere. She really is.
Heyo, short time no see.
Almost too short.
So here are Adol and Karja in front of one of the waystones that are used for auto-saving and healing, and also unlock fast travel points. Very, very similar to the ones in VIII. So here is the game. Just coming back briefly to this question of Adol's young age and the theme of a sort of generational tensions, I came across a very interesting comment in an interview Falcom staff gave with media. And I quote from the interview, link as usual in the description below. It's a story of boys and girls. Since this is the first time we're releasing on Switch, the main characters are younger, and part of that was considering the user base. Now, I thought that was a really interesting insight. I noticed straight away it's really reflected in the whole dialogue, especially the banter between the young people who quickly form a group that sort of always meets at the inn, and yeah, they have food together and discuss all sorts of things. And I had the impression that the dialogue sounded really much more up to date with how young people probably talk, don't ask me, but that's the impression I got. Quite smartened up, if you know what I mean. I sometimes find dialogue in video games between young people, it can get a wee bit tedious, you know, if they try and artificially reproduce this sort of banter. But the one in East 10 is actually fun to listen to, plus it gives you a lot of insight into the characters, of course.
I know it's a little last minute, but after talking stuff out, we decided to throw you to a welcome party, starting now. Long story short, We want to be friends with you guys.
Friends? Hey, you forgetting to ask someone?
I promise you won't regret it.
What's all this?
I'm glad you asked. Welcome to the secret headquarters of the Karnak Free Youth Brigade.
Are you really still set on that whole youth brigade thing?
You never change, Gren. By which I mean never learn. Or grow up. Typical Gren the goofball.
Oh, yeah? You want to say that again to my fist?
Now, break it up, boys. Is this any way to act in front of our guests?
Now, considering we have two main characters in this game, Adol and Karja, the dialogue between those two is, of course, really important. And while Adol himself, of course, does not speak, being a silent protagonist as ever, he does show a lot of reaction, and of course we get text-based responses and dialogue choices. In these exchanges between the two, Karja in particular really shines. Her whole personality comes through, her view of life, reflecting how she grew up as a, feisty Norman young girl, and that's why I mentioned the tsundere bit. But she's got a very dry sense of humour, so her asides constantly had me chuckling away.
I still don't see the problem with what I'm in now.
This goes on the outside. You just put it on, like so.
Hold it! I am a Norman warrior. How am I meant to keep an even keel in that flimsy getup? Fine then. One change of clothes won't kill me. You call this cute? Drafty, more like.
I have to say, that is a very unexpected highlight for me in the game. The interior of the game case, with the digital soundtrack as a code, and a mini art book with 12 pages. It has Adol and Karja, the character design, and then a selection from all the other various designs. So that's what you get if you buy the Deluxe edition. I'll report back with my thoughts on the gameplay and how well they've managed to do it on the Switch. We've discussed this many times before, so you know that things can get a bit more difficult on the Switch these days since it's very much aging hardware. Original mini soundtrack. What's this thing about mini soundtracks these days? Can't I have a maxi soundtrack? It is, of course, you'd have to say, beautifully presented. Definitely a very striking design on the CD disc. So I see 8 tracks are listed, and you should be hearing a little bit of the music occasionally in the background and for highlights. The music, as usual with these games, is composed by 4 composers. The names all look to me like the same that have done Ys soundtracks before, so I'll just pop them up here. The producer for the Ys games is, as always, Toshihiro Kondo, who's also the president of Falcom. But I couldn't find any information at this stage about who the director or directors are. And finally, the art book. NISA always do really nice books, designed and styled to look just a little bit antique, in keeping with the sort of diaries and books that Adol Kristen keeps. So it's got a soft faux leather exterior. It says on the contents page, warning, this book contains spoilers, but from the little I've seen, that consists mainly of short character information next to the character profiles. I'll be careful, but there isn't really an awful lot there that would be a huge giveaway. And here we have Adol Kristen and Karja. I think you can tell straight away from these illustrations that the style has changed quite a bit, and I will show you that they've gone with what I would call a softer style in the graphics, and it looks really, really nice. The visuals to me look very attractive in a sort of pastel type art style, which is very soft and allows for better shading than we've seen in the past. This is Leela, and I won't mention anything else about her because she plays a crucial role in the story, and you really don't want any spoilers about that. There's a double page about the setting of Obelia Gulf, with information, map and illustration. And this is where I'm beginning to see the slight issue I'm having with this art book. It's a small criticism, but I need to voice it anyway. I think it's just a tad on the small side. So some of the detail in the artwork, the maps, etc., doesn't really come out all that well. Don't get me wrong, it's all there, but it could have done just with that little bit of extra size, I feel, for optimum display. I also notice it on this page where keywords are illustrated, like about the sea force and the types of ships they use and the types of monsters. And the illustrations are simply too small to show the really fantastic detail that's gone into the design. However, the chibi artwork looks just fine because it's in the nature of chibis that they will display well at smaller sizes as well. Then follow some illustrations, and in fact we've already seen a few of them in the art cards, like this one. And this being a double spread displays perfectly fine. But this one, for example, of Adol and Karja, well, we've got the art card, and I think you can see that that slight difference in size actually does make a difference in how well the detail stands out. That's the only criticism I have. But you know me, I cast a pretty critical eye over things, and the art book is always especially important to me. There's absolutely nothing wrong with the print quality itself. In terms of colour, it's vibrant and looks just as gorgeous as in the game. So 43 pages of a very nice art book that, in my opinion, could have done with being just a little bit bigger. So, who was the main illustrator for Ys 10? It's an artist called Toy 8, and he is best known for his work on various anime, also light novels, illustration, but anime such as Dot Hack the Movie, Full Metal Alchemist, and several video games where he served as character designer, including Tokyo Mirage Sessions. Also, definitely a favourite game with me. And I Am Setsuna, an absolutely graphically beautiful game. Ys 8 and 9 had a different main illustrator called NAKBE. And there you have it, the Ys 10 Nordics limited edition. You get a small but rather neat Slingbag, the game, obviously your choice of platform, PlayStation 4, 5 or the Switch. It's also available, of course, on Windows PC. There is a mini soundtrack in a very pretty design presentation, a smallish hardback art book, 6, I have to say, outstanding art cards, a square metal pin, and the box itself, of course. I'll be back with some first impressions of the game.
生まれた瞬間、人は皆自由である。
I chose the Japanese voice option on the Switch just to try it out in contrast to the English one on the PlayStation. Both are good, but this is one of those rare cases where I like the English one so much, I think I'll stick with that. So this is the opening scene on the ship with Adol and Dogi, and at first glance the graphics look pretty nice. The weather may be perfect, but the mid-distance graphics look rather on the blurry side.
アドル、お前さんの話に乗ってよかったぜ。
Characters in close-up look really nice, in my opinion. It's actually not too different from the PlayStation 5 version. The problems arise the moment we look into the mid-distance and further distance. That's where the Switch version struggles a bit in docked mode. It's quite obvious here on the deck, and even walking up to characters. The detail doesn't really get enhanced an awful lot, not even with characters who have a speaking option. However, approaching the captain, who is a more important character, we immediately in close-up get the full detail. Even at this early stage in his life, Adol is clearly considered pretty well travelled. The short 30-second clips you can record on the Switch in handheld mode generally showed a 30 frames per second performance. Occasionally it dipped down to 25. I haven't had any really big battles as yet, so to be realistic, I would expect at some points the frame rate to get a bit lower, especially perhaps during the upcoming naval battles. I mention this because I know some people are particularly sensitive to frame rate issues. However, the question really is whether it hinders your gameplay in any significant way, and so far that has definitely not been the case for me. The visuals to me look very attractive in a sort of pastel type art style, which is very soft and allows for better shading than we've seen in the past. Anti-aliasing problems show up only occasionally.
You travel around in search of adventure? Get out of here! That's flippin' awesome!
With a file size of only around 5 gigabytes for the PS5 version, you feel that the console is hardly being pushed in the graphics department. On the Switch, my preference is playing in handheld mode, especially if you have an OLED console. The visuals are nicer that way. The only thing I can't comment on is a performance further into the game with heavier action. However, by limiting the party setup to only 2 members, combat performance is streamlined.
Here I always thought adventure was something you had to seek out. But whenever you're around, Adel, it seems to find us instead.
As always, thank you very much for your time. Please keep well. I'm Food for Dogs. Bye-bye.